Okay, hi. So this week is Parashat Vayishlah, and what we're going to talk about today is, I'll do a little recap and then I'll explain where we're going. So not obviously, but these Parashiyot have been consecutive, chronological, what's the development of the Avot and what's going on in their family life and their personal life and their own connection with God. And last week we spoke about the relationship between Yaakob and his wives, right? We focused on that and how Rachel and Leah were very crucial in helping build Yaakob as a person and also building the nation and his development in that. And today I want to talk about a different angle of Yaakov's relationships. And I want to talk about his relationship with his brother Esav and also his relationship as a son in terms of the relationship that he has towards his brother and how that is played out as his relationship as a son, to his parents, the family unit, and how all that, his base family of his parents and his brother, and how that affects his role as father. We spoke a lot about last week about his role as husband, and now I want to talk about his role as brother, son, and father. Right? Every human has all these facets in them, right? We're not only one thing, obviously. And I just want to say, recently, myself, I've been really into. I have a background in psychology and it interests me. And even though I'm not doing anything so practical with it right now, but I definitely like to read and listen, read books about, psychology and podcasts about different parenting and teaching and parenting. I'm always looking for different and new ideas on that. And a pattern that I've been noticing recently, and the things, maybe it's just something I'm gravitating towards, but I think it's also something that's being more developed in the child development and self-help world and mental health world, is this idea of intergenerational patterns and how things that we either consciously or subconsciously will do are built into us so much because of our parents and grandparents and great grandparents and everything, all those patterns and things before them, and we have to either choose, by not choosing almost and subconsciously following in these patterns, or if it's a pattern we don't want to continue, to consciously develop a way to break away from that pattern. So we're going to talk more about that as the class develops, but I think that this is something, this whole idea of intergenerational and these patterns that get consciously, intentionally or unintentionally passed down from parent to child and parent to child, is something that we see a lot here. These patterns in the early stories of Tanakh with the Avot, for better and worse. We're going to talk about that. And I just want to say from the get-go that anything that seemingly is a critique or negative about the Avot is not, in my opinion, does not diminish from their greatness. And the Hachamim also are not afraid to critique the Avot. I think when we critique the Avot or we show something that wasn't necessarily perfect, it shows how important it is to realize their humanity and realize how their greatness is that they were human and that they were able to overcome their challenges and grow beyond them. So I think that that's something we have to focus on whenever we're studying the Avot or any figure in Tanakh. They're not this godly figure. No one is perfect but God, and that's the beauty of it, that we as flawed human beings can learn from the Avot, who were also flawed human beings, but were able to achieve such high levels. So that's basically my little preamble to all this. Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of a context, and I hope we'll keep building on that moving forward. Okay, so Yaakov, right, where we are right now in the story, is Yaakov was away for 20 years, right? He's been in Lavan's house. He left his parents' house as, he left it as a fugitive, right, from his brother Esav. He went for protection, but like we said last week, he had two goals: leaving his parents' house and going to Haran. One goal was protection, and one goal was to find a wife and build a family. So he did both of those things, right? He protected himself by being in Lavan's house, and he also, as we know from last week, built a huge family unit, right? He has 4 wives now. At this point, he has 11 sons, 1 daughter, right? He has everyone besides Binyamin, and his daughter Dina, and now he is returning. He has left Lavan's house. He's returning to Eretz Israel, and he is going to reunite with Esav, his brother, after all this time. So now Yaakov really doesn't know what he's walking into, because on the one hand, it could be all this time has passed and his brother sort of calmed down, and Esav moved on and is not as heated as he was during the whole Berachot episode, right? And that's one possibility. Or another possibility is all this hatred and jealousy and anger built up over these 20 years, and now he's worse more than ever, right? Now he's more angry and furious more than he ever was. So Yaakov really is walking into a situation where he has no idea which way it's going to go. And the way he gets, what I just, you see this? Okay. The way he's walking into this, the way he's going to prepare for this is we see how he's going to prepare for this is that he's going to not take any chances and seemingly butter up Esav by sending him gifts and praising him. So what do we see? What do we see? What does he do? He sends these gifts of livestock, of basically every domesticated livestock at the time, tons and tons of animals. And not only does he send the livestock, but he sends male and female of the livestock. And why is this significant? Because this gift, we have to realize it from the perspective of the time. This gift is not like sending a bouquet of flowers or a box of chocolate. This is like someone in today's day and age would say, I bought you stock in Apple, or I bought you stock in Google, like something that's going to build and build and build and be an investment for the future. Because think about it, he's giving him a male and female, more than one of each kind of animal. And so it's just going to continue to, they're going to continue to reproduce and build his livestock, which is in the time was his wealth, was his money. So Yaakov gives him this huge gift of, a huge investment. And when he sends these messengers to give this to Esav, he keeps on telling him keeps telling the messengers to repeat, this is from Avdecha, Yaakov. This is from Avdecha, your servant. And so what's going on here? Is Yaakov just hoping that, Esav is this sort of buffoon that's going to be blinded by these flashy gifts, and that's all of a sudden going to, and flattery, and all of a sudden erase all the years of what's been going on? Is that what's happening here? Is that how simple the story is? Or is there something deeper? And we do see, by the way, we'll jump, a second. We see that obviously the gifts work and we do reconcile. So let's break that down a little bit. So what happens? He sends him all these gifts. Esav comes and Yaakov bows 7 times to Esav, right? He's totally, subjugating himself and lowering himself physically, emotionally, right? He's trying to be like, look, I am nothing. You are, you can, and Esav came with 400 men. He's like, look, you have this whole entourage with you. They end up hugging, they kiss, and they cry, both of them. And why is this? And it ends. The whole thing ends with Yaakov saying, "Kach et birchati," take my blessing. And this is very obviously reminiscent of the beracha, the blessing that he took all those years prior from his father. And so, what is going on here? What's this whole song and dance that's going on? And I think the answer comes from the fact that I don't think Yaakov is trying to, blindside Esav and just make him forget. I think this whole thing is sort of a reenactment or a tikkun, so to speak, something that's going to redeem and fix the initial Berachot episode. How? That in the original Berachot episode, we see that that Yaakov was the one who Yitzchak was hugging and kissing, and his neck, he put the fur on his neck to be the hair, like the hair of Esav. And now this is all happening between Yaakov and Esav. And in that episode, Esav's the only one who's crying because he's so hurt about losing the Berachot. And here they cry together as if as if reuniting together. And I think the reason this happens is because Yaakov realizes something. And he realizes that the brothers, the two of them, Esav and Yaakov, had a very different view of what this blessing was. And we can see this from a lot of different things in the story. So Esav sort of sees the blessing as physical wealth, physical success, physical abundance. He sees this as something that can be bartered and traded, right? We see this when he sells it for the Nezidat Hashim a few weeks ago, right? We see this when he hears that Yitzchak gave away the blessing to Yaakov. He says, "But don't you have anything left for me?" And what does that mean? Meaning, if someone has $1,000,000 and he blesses one person with $500,000, then can I have some of the other money that you still have? Right? It's a physical thing that it's tangible. There could be more, there could be less. And Yaakov realizes and sees that, which he is correct about, is that it's not a physical blessing, even though it does have parts of physical wealth involved in the blessing, but it's about the spiritual obligation and blessing and connection of the Birkat Abraham, of Abraham's lineage, and the Zera and Aretz blessing that we keep talking about. And Esav, and we see this also because Esav, when he explains what he has, he says, Yeshli Rav, I have a lot, or I have an abundance, right? And Yaakov says, Yeshli Kol, I have everything. Meaning, if you say I have a lot, there's always more to have, right? I could always add more to that, a lot, to that abundance. There's always more that could be had. But if I say I have everything, I'm content, I realize I am solid in my relationship. In terms of what Yaakov's saying is, he knows that this blessing is a spiritual blessing, and it's a blessing about connection with God and being a messenger of God and being a continuity of the spreading the message of ethical monotheism that his father and grandfather did. And so he feels like, and he says genuinely, Yeshli Kol, I have everything I need. And Esav, because he looks at the blessing as a physical blessing, he says, Yeshli Rav, I have a lot, meaning I always want more. And that's the difference here of Yaakov and Esav, that Esav is rooted in the physicality and always building more physical. And Esav and Yaakov, yes, he is blessed physically. He has all this livestock and this family and everything, but he realizes it's more than that, and it's something spiritual. And by Yaakov understanding what Esav felt he missed out on, he realizes that the way to win him back and to reconcile is by giving him the physical blessing that he so badly wants, and giving him this investment, and giving him the physical outgrowths of his spiritual blessing and his spiritual connection with God, that God's giving him this abundance, and he's giving some of that to Esav. So that's, in a way, how this reconciliation had the two different perspectives, and Esav and Yaakov's ability to understand where Esav's coming from helps him do this reconciliation and this tikkun. And I think we see this also. It's something that's important to realize is that unlike Ishmael, who was totally written off and sent away, Esav is in a way meant to be a crucial part and partner in our development as a nation. He's a crucial part and partner in the development of Yaakov as a person, right? We see that his challenge with Esav, both literally with Esav himself and sort of on a more metaphysical level, when we talk about the Ish that he fights with, right? The Midrashim talk as Saro Shel Esav, as the Malach of Esav, is that on a physical and spiritual level, this challenge with Esav is what builds Yaakov up, right? And this is what Rivka was trying to sort of help Yaakov when she was helping him, get the beracha. She was saying, be a little bit more like your brother Esav. Take some of those qualities that are important for you to have, and not to go on one extreme, but to mesh them and mold them with your spirituality, and to balance that physicality and spirituality from both brothers. So Esav is a very big, crucial part. When we work together appropriately, he is a crucial part in helping develop Yaakov as a person and Yisrael as a nation. And this is why when they separate after this reconciliation, Esav asks Yaakov to come along with him. Esav says, come with me, now we could do this thing together. And Yaakov says, no, I have women, I have children, I have all this livestock, I can't keep up with you. I'll meet you there. And this meet you there, the Hachamim say, is when's the meet you there? When are we going to finally be able to work properly with Esav? Is in the time of the Mashiach, in Acharit Hamim, in the time of the Mashiach, when we all could really have peace with all the nations surrounding us and build properly with Esav. So it's something to realize that he has this in a way. Yes, his wives were Ezer Kenegdo, but in a way, his most telling Ezer Kenegdo, his most telling partner to help him was his brother Esav. And I think that there's also something to realize here is that Yaakov realizing what Esav needed and being able to cater to that and help him and then thus reconciling is the greatness of one of the the midot, amazing midot of the reason why we call Yaakov an ish emet. We call Yaakov a man of truth. And it's funny because we see that through his whole life, Yaakov seems to be a manipulator a little bit and doing things a little bit seemingly underhanded or not so straight. But in reality, what he's doing is he's finding what that person sees as truth and being able to respond according to that person's wants and needs, right? So I think this is something that we could take into all our relationships with siblings, with parents and child, with a spouse, with friends, is that it's not only about thinking what we want, or even more so what we think the other person wants or should want. It's really trying to get in their head and say, what do they want? What do they think of this relationship? What do they want out of this relationship? And how can I help them either achieve that or maybe see differently, depending on what the situation is, in order to fully respond accordingly and build that relationship. So I think that this is a goal and a reason why they were able to reconcile was because of Yaakov's awareness and his attuneness to Esav after all these years and development. So while he's doing all this physical prep and getting and sending these gifts and all that, the night before this encounter, this first meeting, like we said, Yaakov has an encounter with this Ish, right? And the Midrash talks about the Ish being the Malach of Esav, and other interpretations talk about it being his own inner demons, that it was his own inner fight within his own self. Either way, I think what I want to focus on that right now, which I think is important to the theme I'm going on right now, is that it's Yaakov was alone. It says Vayevater Yaakov levado. He ended up saying alone. And why is this significant? Because the first time Yaakov had to confront Esav was when his mother was helping him with all this, right? With the berachot. He wasn't alone. Rivka was helping him deal with the whole fiasco. And here, all these years later, he has to deal with this, with either getting ready to see Esav or fighting the malach of Esav or his own inner demons, which was his own challenges of how do I deal with the Esav elements within me, these physical elements of balancing my physicality and spirituality appropriately with the beracha of Abraham. And he's dealing with all these elements, and that challenge and that individual struggle is what struggle that he has to go through individually, right, is what allows him to transform from Yaakov to Israel, right? From someone, Yaakov, who's holding the ekev and pulling back, versus someone who's Israel, who's a fighter, who's not pulling back, but fighting and being able to succeed. And he has to go through this on his own, which is very challenging, right? And he has to do that in order to fully be able to confront and reconcile and deal with and fix that, right? Counter that relationship with Esav. And I think that this is also a sign of true strength is being able to find someone to confront someone that it's an adversary to you or someone that's against you, and really be able to fix that relationship in the best way possible. Shows an internal growth, right? And not only an internal growth to realize, even though that maybe this person is warranted of, he did do something wrong and I should be against him, but I'm able to overcome those different things. So after this whole encounter, with the malach, right, with the ish, with Esav, with all these things. Yaakov, they separate, Yaakov and Esav, and now Yaakov settles in Shechem, okay? And here in Shechem is when we have the very challenging story, or not necessarily challenging, but very disturbing story of the rape of Dina and her brother's response to that. And it's a very complex story. I've read a bunch of things on it, and it's very very hard story to really grapple with. But before we get into that story in a minute, I want to talk about something a little parenthetically, is that when he gets into this land, when he gets into Shechem, Yaakov, it says, Yaakov buys a piece of land. It says, he buys this plot of land from Bnei Chamor Avi Shrem, from the area of Shrem, the person of Shrem. Now, we could look at this as interesting, it's as significant in two ways. Why does he choose to buy this land? So one way we can look at it is the fact that Yaakov, who's been essentially a refugee all his life, is now reconciled with his brother, and he's going to finally be able to buy land and build his future. Another way to look at it could be is that Yaakov knows that Dafka buy his own place for his children so that they don't have to be on the run like he was. And I think that it's something that we could take on as our, for our lives now, is that thankfully we have Eretz Yisrael now. And if any time that a Jew needs a refuge, needs somewhere to go, he could come to Eretz Yisrael. But even if you don't need to run to Eretz Yisrael, it's always important to think of Israel as a place to build for future generations. And just a little side point, it's interesting because I was having a conversation with another friend who made Aliyah, and we were talking about how us as the first generation of Olim, that we came and we were so taken aback by all these things, not taken aback, so appreciative and the beauty of all these things of it says Shabbat Shalom on the bus, or Chag Sameach, and the holidays that are happening are Hanukkah, not Christmas, and it's all around. And our kids now, they don't see how that's such a crazy, amazing thing like we do. They see that as a given. And on the one hand, it's a little bit of a funny thing, because on the one hand, it's we appreciate it because we know what it's like not to have it. But on the other hand, our kids, the fact that our kids could take it as a given and that's just their life and it's Judaism everywhere, it's just amazing. So, building the future of the Jewish people and not necessarily having to fight as hard as we unfortunately, we still have to fight anti-Semitism, even in Israel, obviously, but it's, just building the future here. So that's my little plug for that. Anyway, back to Dina. So Dina gets raped, right, by the prince of the city. And then he falls in love with her. He's mitaheba, and then he wants to marry her. And he goes to talk to Yaakov and his family about this, arrangement. And what's interesting here is that in the story, we see how Yaakov is silent. It says, Vayicharesh, Yaakov is silent when he hears that his daughter was raped. And the ones who we see talking are his sons, Shimon and Levi, her brothers. Now, it's very weird because we even see that they call her Benotenu, right? They call her our daughter. And but at the end of the story, when Yaakov finally does speak, after they massacre the city, I'll just summarize the story a second just to make sure we're on the same page. Yeah, Dina gets raped. Shem and Chamor come to Yaakov and his family and say, we want to marry your daughter. We want to all marry each other and have peace with each other, and we'll marry your kids, you'll marry our kids. It'll be great. We'll start this whole big, big tribe, big community. And Shimon and Levi say, well, we'll only do that if you circumcise the men. We're only going to marry. We're only going to let our daughter, our women, our daughters marry circumcised men. They get they crazily, they didn't think they were going to agree to it. They agree to it. They circumcise the men, and then when the men are weak after the circumcision, Shimon and Levi go and kill everyone. And then Yaakov says, "How could you do this? This is crazy. How did you do this?" And they answer, "Hakazona yaseh et achotenu." Is our sister going to be like a harlot, like a prostitute? And that's when the story ends. And Yaakov again is silent. So what's going on here? What's the silence of Yaakov? What's this crazy action of Shimon and Levi? What is happening here? And there's many, many different interpretations of this, and one I want to focus on now that I think fits into our theme of the intergenerational, patterns that I want to focus on here, which is a little bit of a critique for Yaakov, but again, like I said, he's overcomes this, and he is one of our avot, so obviously saying it like that. So basically, we have to realize from last week, like we said, Yaakov has a favored wife, right? He loves Rachel. It's very clear in the Psukim. He loves Rachel, and Leah is a senua. And it seems evident that the kids knew this. So imagine here, Shimon and Levi are growing up, and also the other, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, they're growing up as the children of the second, place wife, a second class citizen, so to speak. And their sister, right, Dina, is the daughter of Leah. She gets raped. So now, and then their father is silent about this. So imagine from their perspective, it's like, we're all growing up that we know that we're second class citizens, so to speak, but our sister was raped, and you're not going to speak up. We have to speak up. So, and they even take the father role, right? They call her Benoteno, they call her my daughter. And our daughter, like they didn't say his daughter, they said our daughter, like they, and they take charge of this. And it's interesting because we see how it mirrors, and it says b'midma, right? They tricked, they did all this b'midma to the people, right? They tricked them into getting the brit milah to kill them. They had no intention of marrying them. And it's interesting because this is what Yaakov has to trick his father to get the brachot, which he thinks is due to him, is deserved to him. So in order for the brothers to do what they think is due for their sister's honor, they do this minma also, right? And at the end of the story, when it says hakazonai yaseh achotenu, they're sort of back to the achotenu, saying our sister, saying you might not want to think of her as your daughter in that sense that you need to defend her, but she's our sister and we're going to defend her. And so we see that this pattern of the favored and unfavored child or wife leads to this problem and this whole situation of Dina, and then leads next week and the week after, the next few parashiyot, we're going to see about the stories of Yosef and his brothers, right, and the sale of Yosef, and this whole problem of this pattern and problem of favored versus unfavored is a running theme we see right from the beginning, right? We have Cain and Hevel, that Hevel's gift to God, Hevel's mincha, was favored, and Cain kills him because of that. We have Yitzchak and Ishmael, right? Ishmael gets sent out. We have Yaakov and Esav and all this drama, right, that we spoke about, that ended up Yaakov on an individual level. He corrected that and reconciled that with Esav, but he was obviously didn't impart that to his children. And then we have the problem of Dina, right, the rape of Dina, and then we have the problem of Yosef being sold by his brothers. And this sort of is not solved until Yosef's children, Menashe and Ephraim, that they break the cycle, because we now bless our children, our sons, right, with to be like Menashe and Ephraim, right? And it doesn't fully reconcile till the death of Yosef, where Yosef tells his brothers, "Don't worry, this was all God's hands, and I don't see us as divided. We're finally united." And actually, if you really want to see the patterns, it even goes into the Malchut of Yisrael and Yehuda and all those things in the Nevi'im, which is a whole nother interesting study to realize that whole division. But I'm not going to go into that right now. But anyway, so this whole idea of parents favoring and not favoring, we have to realize that, first of all, even if there is a favor, we shouldn't see it. But if there is a child that seems to be favored, or the one that could take the lead, the parent and the child have to work in a way to use that to unite the family and not to divide the family. So this is going to be something that we see as a theme moving forward as well. Something interesting is that after this whole episode of Dina, we see two instances of burial, right? Two things that are buried. We see that Yaakov takes the Elohei Echad, the Avodah Zarah, the idols, and he buries them under the Elah. He tells his family, give me all the Elohei Echad, give me all the idols, and we're going to bury them under the tree, under the Elah tree. And then we see that Dvorah, who was the Meneket of Rivka, the wet nurse or nanny, or who helped raise Rivka, she dies as well, and she's buried under the Alon. And while this is happening, also, Yaakob builds a Mizbeach in Beit El, which is, and blesses God, right? And then God, and this building of the Mizbeach is fulfilling the oath of what he said when he left Israel, that when I come back safely, I'll build the Mizbeach and call it B'Shem Hashem. Excuse me. And then after all this, Hashem God puts a stamp of approval on the name change, because before the Malach changed his name to Israel, and here God is is saying, calling him Israel, and agreeing or stamping the approval that that's his name. So what's going on with all this? What's going on is that what I think is that these Elohei Echad, what are they? Why does Yaakov's family have Avodah Zarah? The most logical answer seems to be the trafim that Rachel stole when she left Lavan's house. And these trafim, it seems that at the time, each family had certain idols or certain, things that they worshipped, and they were very connecting to the family unit. And by taking these away, Rachel and the family is sort of cutting ties with Lavan, with that part of themselves. And that is cutting ties, so not cutting ties, but bringing Yaakov into his individuality and maturity away from his mother. Again, being able to do this alone, and thus coming into his role as Israel, and also being able, so that Rachel and Yaakov are coming to their own and fully developing to maturity in a sense, and individuals. And this is why he's able to be Israel, and this is why Rivka has Binyamin shortly after. So how does this all tie in? What is the takeaway of all this? So we see that Yaakov is trying very hard, and on some level he does break the pattern of the favored child and what that entails, but it still continues to some level of favoritism through his daughter and his sons, with the stories of Yosef and Dina. And this takes a lot of time to fully reconcile and fully end with. And I think that in our own lives and our own relationships, it's something that's very important to really dig deep into ourselves and really see and reflect what patterns are we perpetuating from our family. And some of those patterns are amazing and should be continued and should be fostered and passed on to the next generation, right? And some of those things are not so great and shouldn't be, and we should break from them. So I think it's really a self-work, and a very challenging self-work, because a lot of times it's something that we don't even realize that we just sort of go into, and these roles we sort of take for better or worse, right? And I think the better, right, when it's for better, we should look and say, wow, this is something that was so ingrained in me because of my parents and how amazing it was. And this, maybe it's, having guests every Shabbat, or giving tzedakah, or just helping people, or whatever it is, right? And or it could be something that's not so great, right? Unfortunately, statistically, I'm going to a big extreme here, obviously, but statistically, people who are abused as children, unfortunately, are more likely to abuse their own children, right? And this is obviously, I'm going to the other extreme, obviously a bad extreme, but there's obviously things in between that are not abuse, that are still something that we want to break free of and improve. So I think that we have to take this lesson that took a lot of development, for our avot to have to go through, and again, this is Bereshit, this is paradigms. We're looking at not only individuals, but we're looking at models of human nature, and human nature is that that we will have favorites, whether it be, obviously now most people, we have one spouse, but in terms of kids, right? If you have more than one kid, maybe it is natural to sort of favor or relate to one kid more for whatever that reason be, or, and focus certain energies in that. or or maybe not feel favored yourself, or feel some resentment, all these different things. And it's human nature to have those challenges, as we see that the Avot had those challenges and how they overcame it, right? They worked in, like Yaakov did with his brother, that he really tried to learn and understand his essence, and build from that, and relate to that. So I really, wish all of us the ability to really dive deep and be honest with ourselves, and see what things that we would love to have our children continue, and future generations continue, and what things that we hope to break the cycle on and do better for our kids. um, and again, these don't have to be crazy crazy things, like abuse, god forbid. It could even be small things that you might want to just tweak and make better, and have a beautiful family life, and your parents are amazing, but maybe just build on this something. So yeah, thank you, and hope you enjoyed, and hope to see you next week. Thanks.